Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and do you know what day and time it is? Well, on this day, every month, the first Wednesday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour, here on Central Time, 9 o'clock Pacific, is the No Regrets Hour with Rhonda Stoppe. Rhonda, welcome to the No Regrets Hour. That you are the host, and I am your co-host. Welcome.
Thanks. It's so fun to be with you. I'm looking forward to it. Well, even though I had to peel some grandbabies off of me when I left this morning, it was worth coming down for the interview.
Well, thank you so much. Rhonda Stoppe is a pastor's wife, speaker, and author. As the No Regrets woman, Rhonda has more than 20 years' experience of helping women live with no regrets. Through humor, honest communication, she helps women build no regrets lives by applying sound teaching from Scripture. She appears on radio programs, speaks at women's events, MOPS, and homeschool conventions throughout the nation. Her book, Moms Raising Sons to Be Men, is mentoring thousands of moms to guide sons to live a no-regrets life. And her new book, If My Husband Would Change, I'd Be Happy, and Other Myths Wives Believe, is helping countless women build no-regrets marriages. Wow, what a concept, to live life without regrets. The only way I guess you can live life without regrets is to do what Paul says, which is, not that I've accomplished all this, but this I do, forgetting what's behind and pressing on to the mark, to the high calling, to the prize in Christ Jesus. Yes. Is that really the secret to all of this, living a no-regrets life?
That is absolutely the secret. And you know, I just spoke at a women's conference last weekend, and that is the one thing that I think I hear more and more from women is, well, it's too late for me to build a no-regrets life because I've already done X, Y, and Z, and I can't take it back. And my heart is to help women understand that we can break free of those regrets that hold us back. We've all done things that we regret, and I think that that's great that you brought up Paul and his issue. What did Paul have to forget that lay behind him? Think about when his name was Saul, that he stood holding the cloaks of the crowd, cheering them on while they threw stones at a young man named Stephen who had the face of an angel because he was a Christian. That just makes me cry even thinking about it. Talk about regret. Talk about something that would keep you up at night, something that the enemy would want to use to whisper in your ear. Who are you for God to use you when you were a part of that? We know that story. We don't know the stories of family after family where Paul, in his zeal as Saul, broke into Christian homes, into prayer meetings, and ripped maybe the patriarch of the family from the arms of his children and the wife as the kids are pleading not to take their daddy. And that father was taken and put to his death for his faith in Jesus Christ. We don't know those stories because the Bible doesn't give us those details, but we do know the zeal that Paul had to put an end to this, quote, false religion of Christianity until, of course, Jesus met him on the road. And when he was met on the road, and you know, first of all, Jesus says, why do you persecute me? I mean, he didn't even know. He was really doing this, thinking he was doing something for God. But when God got a hold of that man's heart and changed him, you know, the Bible says he takes a heart of stone and he replaces it with a heart of flesh. And he writes his statutes on our hearts. And then he causes us to walk in his ways. When God got a hold of Paul, there's no turning back. I mean, he went to his death. You know, he's writing his final letter to Timothy saying, I'm ready. I'm going to be poured out as a drink offering. See if you can make it here by wintertime. I mean, he was in a dank, cold, dark, just disgusting prison that was meant for criminals, freezing. He was cold. And here he's writing a letter of encouragement. Mm-hmm. And then even when he wrote to the Philippians, he said, you know, forget what lies behind. Press on to what lies ahead. I press toward the mark of the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. That's the key to breaking free from the regrets that hold us back and to building a no-regrets life.
You know, when I look at my own life, I look at others' lives and their marriages, I realize that most of us think that we've broken the chains, but we wind up with a bungee cord. And it's not heavy like a chain. It moves with us. You know, a chain, you can hear it and it grabs you, but a bungee cord, you can be hooked on and you can be just kind of going along, and bam, boom, you're pulled backwards because there's something unreconciled. And I think that one of the lessons that I got from your second book, If My Husband Would Just Change, I'd be happy, is that we buy the lie. There are a series of lies that you call them myths because you're generous, gracious, and less confrontational than me. I'm extremely compassionate, but I still call it a lie. And it comes from the father of lies.
Yeah.
And there's things that we buy into. We buy into them either because we were programmed, because our role models, examples, and we don't use Christ as the role model for marriage, although we're supposed to. For a guy, I don't know if we get a lot of what he said when it comes to marriage. It's different. For women, looking at a man as a role model for marriage may also be somewhat of a leap, and especially for a guy that was never married to be giving so much advice about marriage. But how could you understand? You've never been married. You don't know what I wake up with, what I deal with all the time. But there are a lot of lies, and you start out with the master lie. If my husband would just change, I would be happy. Is there the other side of that book? If my wife would just change, I would be happy, and other myths that men believe.
And oftentimes what men say is, if she wouldn't have changed, I would be happy. She's not the woman I married anymore.
Yes.
And I want her to be that woman that she used to be, the one that was fun, the one that, would pick up at a moment's notice and go wherever I wanted to go, and looked at me with those stars in her eyes. Where'd she go? I want her to be that person. Where a lot of times women marry thinking, oh, I'm going to fix him. I'm going to make him just exactly what I want him to be, and I'm going to be happy. And men are thinking, if she never changes, if this is who I'm marrying. And what's interesting is a lot of times I think what I hear from men is what they're saying is, I like who I am when I'm with her. Mm-hmm. I like who she makes me be when I'm with her. She makes me believe I could do anything. She makes me believe that I can do no wrong. She makes me believe, fill in the blank. And women, we do that when we're courting, when we're dating, when we want to hook the guy. We put him on a pedestal and we hang on his every word, and we don't correct him in front of his friends, and shame him in front of the children because he didn't take the garbage out, and disrespect him because he's not measuring up to our expectations. When we're dating them, when we're trying to woo them to be the one that they're going to marry us, we actually feed that need that they have. But sometimes along the way after we get married, life becomes about work. Life becomes about just getting the laundry done, just keeping the kids alive one more day, just paying the bills or not paying the bills and fighting over that. And we lose sight of that person that we were when they married us, and they liked who they were when they were with us. But as we're picking a fight with them, or as we're giving them the silent treatment and they're just like trying to ignore us or whatever, they're becoming someone they don't even care that they like themselves. And yes, there's a responsibility to be the person God's called you to be, and to hold fast your integrity before Christ, and to not let anyone, the way they treat you, affect the way that you relate to others. And yet, do we make it easy for them? Do we make it easy for them to just want to be with us? Wives, he works all the time, he comes home late, he goes out with his friends, he never wants to be with me. Well, are you easy to be with? Are you fun to be with? Or are you somebody that when they are with you, you start pointing out all their flaws or all the things that they need to change? And that's kind of hard, and I don't mean to just, but I visit with a lot of married couples, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I had a kind of interesting experience 2 days ago. My kids were home, and I had 3 granddaughters home, and then my daughter and son-in-law came up, and their 3 grandbabies, and these are all, one is 7, one is 3, and one is 1, and 2 are 8 months old. So there's a lot of fun activity going on. We're making dinner, and it's super hot, heat wave in California, like ridiculously hot. And we don't have air conditioning in our downstairs of our house, and we were usually okay, but it was so hot. And we had the oven on because I was making dinner, and we were all making a dinner. It wasn't just me, but we made meatloaf because that's what my son-in-law wanted for his birthday, and it was so delicious, and he was so appreciative. And I'm making gravy, and it's hot, and I opened a window, and I turned off a light in the kitchen because the window doesn't have a screen on it. I live in the country. I don't have a screen on that window because that's where I throw all the stuff to the chickens and all the leftovers that go out to the peacocks. So I had the window open, but the light off in the kitchen so the bugs wouldn't come in. And I'm making this gravy and trying to last minute. And Steve walks into the kitchen, and all he said was, if you would turn the light on outside on the porch, that would draw the bugs to the light instead of worrying about them coming in. And I went, you think you could do that? And that's exactly how I said it. And he kind of looked at me, and I just went back to making my gravy. And later I had to go back and say, I am really sorry that I responded to you that way. And he said, I forgive you. And then the next morning I had to apologize to my kids for snapping at my husband for, that. And it's one of those things where you get in the heat of the moment and things are going on and you're trying to get stuff done. And he came in with a very good suggestion and he was being very helpful. And I'm making brown gravy because we're going to have gravy with this. And he said, a nice suggestion. And instead of me being gracious, I turned and said, do you think you could do that? And later, you realize that's not who I want to be. That's not who I want my grandkids to think I am. So I had to go back and apologize to the whole family that I snapped at Papa. And of course, they were all real gracious and everything. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's in the moment of life that,
sure,
just regular life, that things are, I was hot. It was probably, 112.
It's not like you had a rattlesnake in your bathroom.
Can we talk about that?
Yes, please.
And I certainly wasn't telling him how to do his business when he killed the rattlesnake for me. Now what?
Right. I pulled that up, and you put a cautionary message there that for the audio portion of this, just want to warn you. And of course, that for me as a Jew was like, well, yeah, I got to play this. I got to see what it is that she's doing. So I hear the noise and I hear the yelling and the rattle. I hear the rattle. And there you are.
I was standing on the couch. So you can go to my Instagram at Rhonda Stoppe if you want to watch that. And I put this video up because what happened, we live in the country. We live on an 80-acre ranch in the middle of nowhere. And that's a super fun story. And I tell that in If My Husband, how Steve wanted to be debt-free. And we ended up moving out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's a crazy life, but it is fun. And Steve, the dogs were barking. And so it was it nighttime? I can't even remember. Daytime, I guess, evening. So Steve steps out of the front door to see what the dogs are barking, and he's on the porch, and he hears what he thinks is a broken water pipe behind him gushing water. And he turns to see what it is, and it's a rattlesnake. I mean, it was so loud, it just sounded like shh. So he sees it's laying right up against the doorstep by the front door, and then it starts to coil to launch at him, so he can't reach over to close the door, and it goes in the house. And he's yelling, Rhonda! And I'm thinking he's yelling at the dogs because it's the only thing he really yells out there at. And I come out and he goes, don't come. And I go, what? He goes, there's a snake in the house. And I go, there's a snake in the house. And then I can hear this rattle. And it's a rattlesnake. And it is 4 feet long. It was as big around as this water bottle. And when a rattle outside, you hear it. But in a house, it just bounces off the walls. So it had gone from the front door right into the front bathroom. And it was in a corner. And I'm like, do you want me to get the gun? And he's like, no, I can't shoot it in the house. And I'm like, if I'd have been alone, I'd have shot a hole in the floor.
Right.
So he said, just watch it while I go get a shovel. So I'm standing on the couch watching it because he said I need to know where it's at in the house. So if it leaves that spot, you have to know where it's at. So I'm alone in the house with an English Mastiff puppy who's about, 50, 100 pounds. And she hears it, so she comes running, and I'm like trying to yell at her. I have to get off the couch to pull her back. That's when it got a little bit like frantic. Anyway, he comes in and he cuts the thing's head off, and he's the man. I have a high respect for him, and everyone keeps asking me to put the bloody video on because there is more video. Of course, if you don't get a video of it, it didn't happen these days. I got video.
What amazed me was you had the mind to video the whole thing, to record it all, and then put it out there and say, listen, I'm not just the no regrets woman. I am frontier woman. I am pioneer woman. And this man that I've been telling you about that changed my life, that changed my attitude, that was an instrument of God, all these things is now again my hero. How much more do I have to show you that he is the man?
He is, yes. And I always hashtag all my stuff, the Life in the Canyon. So if you click on a hashtag Life in the Canyon, you'll see a lot of our crazy things that happen up here.
And if you want to feel good about your own life and some of the challenges, listen, you don't have peacock problems, but Rhonda does.
Oh yeah, did you see the peacock that ate the styrofoam?
I did. So, these are extraordinary stories. So what people have to understand is that you are actually, what you see is what you get. It is reality TV, much better than anything else you could ever imagine, and it's all God-centered, it's all God-centric, it's all about the Lord. Her husband is a pastor, spirit-filled, loving man that had a vision and is living that vision, and you always weren't on the same page with him, were you?
No, actually, and for some of your listeners that haven't heard us talk about this before, when we were living in the Bay Area, housing prices were very expensive. We got married in the 80s, and it was really expensive to buy a house, so we found a fixer-upper that we moved into and fixed it up, and then we realized that the way we could make money off of equity was to buy and sell houses. So, there's a lot of shows on right now about fixer-uppers and fixing up houses. We actually lived in them. I'd say clean up one room, and if I can have one room that doesn't have any disgusting whatever, I will live in that one room and we'll do the house. So we did that a number of times. All the while, Steve had in his heart a desire to be debt-free. And he had gone to Bible college. I didn't meet him till he came home from Bible college. He was working in construction, and we always worked in youth ministry. Our passion was youth for 18 years, and we were praying for the Lord to use us in full-time ministry. And what happened was, as Steve was praying about that, he was also wanting to be debt-free, and we were working toward that, while we had a boat and a Mercedes and a van and a house and all those things that you get when you're living in the Silicon Valley lifestyle. And the church that we were at, the youth pastor had gone, and Steve was filling in. He was the interim, and the church had offered him the full-time position. And when they offered him that, Steve came home and said, they offered me the job. And I was excited. I'm like, let's do it. That's what we've been praying for. And he said, we can't. We have so much debt, we could not live on what they're offering us. And that's when we both realized we're praying that we were available to be used, but our lifestyle was not available. So we sold everything. And Steve found this little shack in the middle of nowhere. And at the time when we found it, it was covered with snow, so it looked like a cute cottage. And we bought this 80-acre ranch up in the mountains outside of the Silicon Valley. And then when the escrow closed, we went and looked at the house, and the snow had melted, and it was a shack. I lived 2.5 years on a generator. There was no power. And we slept on a sofa bed. We had 2 kids at the time who had the 1 bedroom. And I got pregnant with my youngest while we were living on the sofa bed. Fun stories. In fact, if you go to my website, noregretswoman.com, there's some audio of me teaching through with my husband, and one of them is called Cute Cottage or Shabby Shack, and that one, it'll talk about that story. But all that to say, God put a vision in my husband's heart to be debt-free. And I would say yes, but I wasn't living like I meant yes. And when we finally gave up everything and moved to the middle of nowhere and waited on the Lord through a series of events in our lives, and we moved to Texas for a while, we planted a church in Austin, we kept our ranch, we came back because the church that we had found in a little town 22 miles down the mountain invited Steve to be the senior pastor. So way too long of a story, sorry. We ended up, he was able to take the job as pastor of First Baptist Patterson, and they had a very small salary, but we were able to accept the position because we didn't have a house payment. So, and that was probably 15 years after we had become debt-free that God finally brought that about in our lives. So it's kind of fun because sometimes we have to just trust our husbands when God's putting a dream in their heart. And I knew I was holding Steve's dream in my hand. If I would have said we're not moving, we wouldn't have moved. And yet, I think him all the time now, even though we have rattlesnakes in our house. We've had a tarantula in our house once, too. I told Steve, in 28 years, we've never had a snake in our house. And he goes, that you know of? And I'm like,
right.
So, yeah, all those are fun stories. But, you look back, no regrets. You look back and you say, okay. I didn't always handle it well. After I had that 3rd baby, I had postpartum, and I was a wreck. And I had to go back on many occasions and tell my husband, I am sorry, I was such a mess. I remember saying, please let me go to work. You stay home. This is your dream. You live up here. Let me go. He was leaving at 5 in the morning, not coming home till 7 at night. And I was like, I know I can work and you can stay home. And he would have loved to, but I just couldn't make enough money to make it work.
You draw from your own experience, which makes it very real, sometimes raw, sometimes very direct. But these myths that were impacting your marriage are ones that you share with others, because if we don't speak about it, if we don't take it out of the darkness, out of that secret place and bring it out into the light, it does grip so many marriages. Mm-hmm. There are several places that you write regularly for. Crosswalk is one of them, where you're a regular contributor to them. You are a regular contributor here on our program. The first Wednesday of every month at noon is one of my favorite hours of our programming day and programming month, the No Regrets Hour. But in these articles that you wrote, you talked about myths that are killing marriages. And they are killing marriages. And I know that as I've scrolled through the myths husbands believe, myths wives believe, I can put a check mark next to every single one of them. And I am not the icon for successful marriage, unfortunately. I was in the world for 44 years. I lived as the world. I served the enemy. I was employee of the month for Satan. I had my own parking space. I was destined for greatness in the kingdom of hell. But for the grace of God, I was redeemed from that and came to faith in my Jewish Messiah, and had to be willing to count the cost of losing 14 million relatives. See, people don't realize that when a Jew comes to the Lord, you've got to be willing to lose your family and really count the cost. For Christians, for Gentiles, there's no cost. But for us, there's a huge price to pay. And there are those that still don't talk to me this day, but my mother does, and one of my sisters does. And so, but life changes in the Lord, and you change. You become transformed. I'm not who I was. I'm not who I was yesterday. And I won't be tomorrow who I am today. And I rejoice that every day I'm a new creation, because every day I'm in Messiah. And therefore I have this promise that every day I'm new. Behold, I make all things new. The cells that I went to bed with aren't the same cells I woke up with. The hair, I don't wake up with the same hair. I'm new. My whole body is regenerated through rest in Him. And so, but there are things that people hold on to, and it's hard to convince them to let go, to change their way of thinking. And the only way that they change their way of thinking is what it tells us in the book of Revelation, is we are overcomers by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. You believed all of these myths in your marriage, and you were princess, goddess, the anointed, spoiled one, as you self-describe. As how I've come to know you is that who you were and who you are so different, because you had this wake-up call, you had this epiphany, you had come to the end of you. And so we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I want you to tell just a little bit of who you were, who you become, and what some of these myths are, so that people can live a no regrets marriage. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with the No Regrets Hour with Rhonda Stoppe. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, welcoming you to the No Regrets Hour with Rhonda Stoppe, author of 2 fabulous books, Raising Sons to Be Men, and If My Husband Would Just Change, I'd Be Happy, and Other Myths Wives Believe. Rhonda Stoppe, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, good to be back.
Rhonda, women buy into certain myths about their husbands. The first one being, if my husband would just change, I would be happy. Why is that a myth?
You know, we were created to find our worth in who loves us. We were created to ache to find our significance and our value in a relationship with someone that adores us. But the reality is, it was not in a relationship with a person. When God put Adam and Eve in the garden and he walked with them in the cool of the day, it was an intimate love walk with their Creator. And when they ate of the fruit in the garden, at that moment, that life that they had, that God had breathed life into them, that life left them and they became dead in their trespasses and sins. And this big, huge, empty vacuum hole filled their heart. And God wasn't willing to leave us out there. So he, even to, preach the gospel to Adam and Eve and said, I'm going to send help. I'm going to send a Messiah. But what we have found from that day until present is every single one of us are born in our sin. We all know that, because of one man sin entered in the world, death by sin, so all have sinned. And we're born with this vacuum, this emptiness in our heart that can only be filled by the adoration of the one who created us to be the one who adores us. But because that void is there, we look to people to fill it. We look to our husbands, we look to our children, we look to our friendships, we look to our siblings, our parents, to fill this void, to make us feel valued, to make us feel like we are significant. There was a famous host, talk show host, and at the final of all of her interviews for the years that she'd done interviews, she said, the number one thing I've learned about people in the years I've interviewed them is they're all aching, they're all longing for significance. And I think that is the truth. That's why we see our kids, go off into peer groups that are going to bring them down. They maybe allow themselves to go a direction they know is wrong, but they feel valued by a certain peer group, or they don't feel like a dork at school or whatever. So they'll involve those things. But the same thing with, every princess, every happily ever after story that we read, that we love, always has Prince Charming just riding in and sweeping the princess off her feet and carrying her off into the sunset where she lives, happily ever after. And we all think that's the key to happily ever after, is finding the prince that's going to sweep us off our feet, make us feel happy. And we put all of that on our spouse. Men do it with their wives as well, that person is the source of our happiness. So when we wake up after a certain amount of time of marriage and we think, wow, I don't think I married Prince Charming, I think I married Dopey or Sneezy or Doc or Grumpy or one of those guys, then we start looking at this spouse saying, okay, you're the key to my happiness and I'm not happy, so you're letting me down. So there's nothing wrong with me leaving this relationship and finding someone else who's going to fill that void, because you didn't measure up to my expectations, so I'm going to discard you and I'm going to go look for someone else. And I think that's the nature of marriage in our culture, is the idea that my happiness lies in this person, and when this person doesn't make me happy anymore, there's someone else that will. And that's a lie. You were talking earlier, the lie from the enemy. The God of this world has blinded our eyes through sweet fairy tale love stories that we all let our children watch and we adore them, and yet we are consumed by this entitled to feel happy, and entitled that person, if they don't measure up, then I'm going to move on. My new book that's coming out with Harvest House, Real Life Romance, I'm so excited about it. It's like 25 love stories that are just, it's recapturing romance and making us see real life love stories that honor Christ, that are ones that God's providence knit the heart together of two people that are in love. We need stories out there where people see what real life romance looks like. So when we believe that our source of happiness lies in our spouse, the key, that let me let on a secret, we were never created to find our happiness in another person. That will never happen. We were created to find our happiness in the one who created us. And that obviously begins with a real relationship with Jesus Christ, not just practicing religion, not just doing what we think God expects us to do so he's happy with us, but a true covenant. We talked about covenant last month's show, if they want to go back and look at that.
Rhonda, as we look at this concept of marriage, is the key to a happy marriage kind of like, there's a winery in California, Napa Valley, and the label is called Folie à Deux. The winery is called Folie à Deux, which in French means a fantasy shared by two. It's actually a psychiatric condition. And the couple are two psychiatrists that married each other, and they both had a dream, a fantasy of having a winery. And their label is an ink blot, and it's called Folie à Deux. And so I was so fascinated by this when I lived in Southern California. I went up to Napa because I wanted to meet them, because this whole concept was so interesting to me. I never heard of it. And they said, well, it's like if you think you're Josephine and your husband thinks he's Napoleon, and you act that out together as a fantasy shared by two, it is the ultimate bonding experience for two psychiatrically off people. They find a great deal of happiness. Well, my wife and I, as the psychiatrist was talking to me, my wife and I shared this fantasy of being vintners, of having a vineyard and a label, and we shared that, and it became a part of our happiness. So in biblical terms, I translated that to without a vision, the people perish. If a husband and wife don't have a vision, is there a myth in regards to who's responsible for crafting that vision? Do we put that burden of vision architecting? Does a wife put it on her husband? Does a husband put it on the wife? She's supposed to define the home. He's supposed to be the provider. Have we allowed roles to determine, and then we come up short and we say, but you didn't come up with a vision, or I don't like your vision. And now we become sideline quarterbacks and backseat drivers. Are we supposed to do this in partnership?
You know, one of my favorite stories is my oldest son, Tony. He is a fighter pilot in the Air Force. He's actually a lieutenant colonel. And when he graduated from high school, he went to A&M University. Anyone who went to A&M, I know you just yelled whoop right now. And when he was in the Corps, he was a head of his unit. And they would run in the mornings. They did like a lot of what was like boot camp or basic training before and after classes. So they'd get up super early and do running. They'd be fully packed with their, guns overhead, and they'd be running with their unit. And as they ran, they had one woman in their unit, and she would always lag behind. So Tony's guys would get to the finish line and then wait for her. And when their commandant saw that, they got in trouble. They had to do push-ups until she crossed over the finish line. Their time did not count until she crossed over the finish line. So that brought the morale down. They got mad at her for, she's a girl, all that. And so Tony had to figure out what to do about it. So what he would do is he would go to the back of the unit as they ran, and he would put his hand in the small of her back. And he would run. And he said as long as his hand was in the small of her back, she would keep pace with the unit. As soon as he would take his hand out of the small of her back, she would fall behind. So the way that he solved the problem was to run alongside of her and get her over the finish line with his hand in the small of her back. And I tell that story a lot when I speak at women, college-age, single women events. Paul said we run the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. We run that race that's set before us. We lay aside whatever so easily entangles us, and that's all in Philippians, which I love the book of Philippians. And what we have to realize is that's what God wants from us, is to keep our eyes fixed on Christ and run the race that he has for us. In Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. But God goes on and talks after that. He keeps talking in verse 12. He says, if you seek me, you will find me. If you search for me with your whole heart, I will be found of you, declares the Lord. And then he goes on and says, and then I'll set you free from your captivity. Our captivity is looking for happiness in the people around us. And when we are stuck there, we are always going to come up short. There's always going to be seasons of euphoria and disappointment. And we are going to bring disappointment. I know I'm not the wife I wish I would have been in certain circumstances, or the mom I wish I could have been in certain circumstances. But the goal, Paul says, and I believe this with all my heart, and there were older mentor women that spoke this truth into me, is what rescued me from being the wife I would have been, fixing my eyes on Christ. There's a race to be run that God has set before me, and we are not men of the word. Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And I'm sipping on my smoothie because I have that blood sugar thing. If I don't eat if I don't eat, I can't think. But we have to realize that as much as we need food, Jesus is like, you need the word of Christ to dwell in you richly, so that you think with the mind of Christ, so that you have the mind of Christ, that you have the biblical worldview, that all of your relationships, all of life circumstances are filtered through this biblical perspective. It's not practicing a religion. It's becoming the person that God has called us to be. As Romans 12 says, that we are being transformed by the renewing of our mind. And then as I'm running, if my husband's hand happens to fit into the small of my back and he helps me run that race, and he's looking at Christ and I'm looking at Christ, and we're both, you were talking about that the fantasy of working together for if our goal is, I just want to run this race that Christ has for me. He saved us to good works that he ordained in advance that we should walk in them. And if my husband and I can walk in that together, that's a power couple. That's a couple who says, I don't want to just look to you. Does it mean I don't often, there's times, there's what, every 28 days, hey, make me feel good about myself. If we do that, but we come back to a place of going, but you know what? You are not my ultimate source of happiness. It's in my relationship with Christ. And as I seek God with my whole heart, he'll set me free of my captivity of the person I was raised to be, the person who I was told this is what you deserve because of who you are. You deserve to have someone treat you this way, or, whether it's, you were put on a pedestal or whether you were told you're not going to be worth anything. Those are all lies from the pit of hell. But God says, you are my treasure. You are my precious pearl that I will give up everything to capture you for myself. And that's, if we live right there, then all of our other relationships will be influenced by that, because then the Bible says that loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength is the priority of our life. That's my whole being. The second commandment is to love my neighbor as myself. So as I'm loving God by pressing in, and I remember having this conversation with God, I don't even know how to love you like that. I will love you selfishly. I will love you for what I can get out of you. I will love you for the blessings I think you should give me. I want to love you selflessly, but I need you to do it through me. And the Bible says if we have not because we ask not. When was the last time we asked God, can you love you through me with your love? Because I want to love like that, and I want you to teach me. And then what spills out of us is the second commandment, loving our neighbor as ourselves, because it's not hard. Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When it's hard to love others around us and it's burdensome, then we're not loving God properly. I think of Psalm 119, 165, great peace have they that love thy law, and nothing shall offend them, or nothing shall cause them to stumble.
Rhonda, one of the myths that we've talked about in the past that I really want to hone in on today is that all he wants is sex. Mm-hmm. That there seems to be intimacy has moved from sweet romance to carnal satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And the blush of romance is now gone. What happens? What is going on in this myth?
Well, first of all, I think that talking to women first, we need to realize that for most men, there's a book called For Women Only by Shanti Feldon, and one of the things that I love about that book is men could just say whatever they wanted to say anonymously for women to read. And it's a really easy read. It's a good book. Shanti Feldon actually wrote an endorsement in the cover of my book, If My Husband Would Change, I'd Be Happy. High respect. She's a social researcher with a biblical worldview. And so what these men were saying was, I wish my wives would stop making me feel like I have to apologize for asking for sex. And one of the things that I talk about in If My Husband is husbands, they struggle with a sense of feeling inadequate or lonely, most of them. And what wives don't realize is that when they say that they feel happier after they have spent time with their wife in the bedroom, it really fills them with a sense of satisfaction of feeling confident and feeling alive and feeling wanted and desired. And it really makes a difference even when they're at the office the next day. And what women think, because we are women, that for the most part, the way that we connect is through conversation. Look me in the eye, tell me your life's dreams or how your day went and spill your heart to me. And our husbands walk in, they've used all their words, they're tired. And you say, let's talk. And they go, what do you want to talk about? Well, just tell me how you're doing. I've been home with kids all day. I've been eating crusts off of bread. What'd you have for lunch? I didn't even get lunch. And, I'm wearing the same yoga pants I've had on for 3 days. What are they wearing out there now? And the husband is just like, I don't want to talk. I've used my words. And there's this need that we have to connect emotionally. Most women, there's always this exceptions to these rules, through conversation, through reveal your heart to me. Tell me what your hopes and dreams are. Tell me something that you love about me. Tell me why you think I'm beautiful, or what why you can't wait to come home to me. Tell me those romantic words. And men are thinking, I just want to take you to bed. I don't want you to talk. And so there's this cycle of, well, he's not going to talk to me. I'm certainly not going to be in the bedroom with him. And this real miscommunication of what our needs are. Where if we would understand, if our husbands came home for 2 weeks and did not speak one word to us, and we asked them and they just said, I'm too tired, used all my words, do not want to talk to you right now, what would we do? We would go somewhere else to fill up our emotional tank. Right. We'd talk to our girlfriends, we'd talk to our children, we would get emotional affirmation through words somewhere else. But in the same way that God created most women to feel that need to connect through conversation, he created our husbands to feel that emotional need with his wife in the marriage bed. So what we do as wives, we think they should be able to get their emotional tank filled up by conversation. And when they don't, we make them apologize that what they need from us is some time alone with us in the bedroom. And so what we have to realize is 2 weeks of not having relations with our husband and saying, I'm too tired, don't touch me, the kids have touched me all day, I've had enough. We're rejecting them, and it would feel the same way to them that it feels to us if they didn't speak to us for 2 weeks. Somebody's got to make the difference. Somebody's got to give. Let it begin with you, whether you're the husband listening or the wife listening. What is the need of my spouse? Let me fill up their emotional tank. Instead of everybody kind of going off into their corner saying, well, I'm not going until you do, and you're not going till you do, and then the marriage just kind of crumbles. Instead of realizing God's called us to this ministry of marriage, he's called us to be one with one another, to know each other intimately, to know what their needs are, and then to fill that need that God has called us to fill. Right. It's a ministry.
You know, the image of man not being fragile or men not feeling rejected. I've had many instances where I've talked to families, experienced it myself, where love is used as a weapon. The withholding of love, the withholding of affection to accomplish some manipulative practice. And I begin to see that the gateway drug to witchcraft is selfishness and desire. This is the gateway drug. You then see that if I can manipulate, if I can make them do, if I can force the hand, if I can get a piece of jewelry, get a vacation, get a gift, get a car, then I'm going to use this as my tool. This becomes the gateway drug for marriage. And so that becomes a rut, a behavior, a pattern, and it becomes a conflict where men will withdraw. Men will feel rejected. Men will feel diminished in the marriage. And because of that, they'll be drawn to that which they don't feel diminished, which is usually their work, and where they are respected, where they are listened to, where they have authority, where they are uplifted or encouraged because they have a set of metrics. And metrics are easy. I'm at 125% of my quota. I'm at 150% of my annual revenue goal. I'm feeling pretty good about myself and my team. Let's go out and celebrate. Well, you'd rather go home and celebrate, but there's no one there to celebrate with. So you wind up focusing where you get your affirmation. By the same token, women do the exact same thing and look to find that affirmation if they're not finding it at home. But shouldn't we endeavor to find it in a relationship with the Lord that's facilitated in the home and then carried out into the community? Who, in your opinion, in your experience, who is responsible for the first step?
Well, I think I agree with Unmet Expectations are one of the most destructive contributors to broken marriages. And my husband and I do biblical marriage counseling, and we sit in this office with couples that is what the bottom line is. This person has not measured up to my expectation, and so I feel betrayed.
Yes.
And when we're in a sense of betrayal, we put up our defenses, we put up our walls, we put up our protection, and there's oftentimes that manipulation. I'm not going to serve you unless you serve me in whatever area or aspect of life that it is. And oftentimes in a conversation that we're having here, there's going to be people that are watching who one of the spouses is a believer and the other is not. Or one will be committed to follow Christ and the other one may call themselves a believer but does not really pursue walking in obedience to a lifestyle that honors Christ. And we cannot do anything about anyone's life around us except our own heart, except our own life. And so where does it begin? It begins with me. It begins with me saying, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me, know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me. Lead me in the way everlasting. I'm speaking at a minister's wives retreat next weekend in Southern California, up in above Ontario. Talkwoods Pines is the campground. And I love ministers' wives retreats. I speak at a lot of them because I am a pastor's wife and I know how vulnerable that we can be. And the enemy, maybe the husband is on his knees and in the Word and he's got his guard around him and the Satan can't penetrate. But he'll go after that wife and he'll go after those kids. And as wives of those who minister, as the minister to the minister, I have to be aware of my own sin and how that can distract my husband even from what God's calling him to do, discourage him, or maybe isolate me from him. If I'm gossiping about every woman in the church who's let me down, he's going to have to break a fellowship with me where it's like, I don't even want to hear this woman talk because she's bringing me down. So finding the way is saying, okay, I have to know there's no one in this life that I'm responsible for except myself. And even as a parent, if I, the Bible says that we live, let our light shine before men that they may see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven, represent his character. If I live that way, that will be the light that God can use to draw my children or my unbelieving spouse to want to know my Savior. If I'm just preaching at them, telling them what they're doing wrong, that God doesn't like it, that is not what's going to draw them to Christ. But, I love Peter's like, shut up, girls. If you want your husband to come to Christ, stop talking and live it. And I think that for whether they're a believer or not, whether they're walking in obedience to the kind of spouse they should be or not, let that be in God's hands. In fact, the Bible says in James, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous one accomplishes much. If I'm resentful toward my husband, if I'm angry or bitter toward my husband, then my own prayers will be rendered ineffective because I am walking in sin. I can't even pray effectively for God to convict my husband. One point real quick, because we're almost done, that you talked about where husbands will go to work, they'll also go to the computer. Pornography is huge, and it's destroying marriages, it's destroying lives, and I wish I had time to chat about that more, but I'll tell you this, there's a story in my new book, Real Life Romance, where Chuck and Angie tell their love story. He was raised in a Christian home, ended up thinking as a teenage boy, I'm going to look at pornography so that I'm pure for when I get married. I'm not going to have sex till I get married, but I'm going to do this until then. And so once he married a really sweet Christian woman, he realized he was addicted to pornography. And when she realized it, she was so devastated at that he didn't want her in the marriage bed. And she has some really great insights, but one of the things that she said is that when I realized my sin of resentment toward him was just as destructive and just as wicked as his sin of the addiction to pornography, that's when my prayers became effective. When I repented of that resentment and I forgave him, and she said it wasn't easy, and it was, daily having to go back, getting godly mentors in her own life. But once she repented of her sin and she began working on walking in a relationship with Christ that was not holding unforgiveness, then her prayers became powerful. And then her husband did get victory, and it drew him to her rather than driving him away from her because she's shaming him with her words.
Well, as always, tremendous insight, always self-reflection applied to biblical truth to allow people to see through you how to live a no-regrets life. You can follow Rhonda Stoppe at rhondastoppe.com or noregretswoman.com. You can sign up for her newsletter. You can follow her articles on Crosswalk, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Rhonda Stoppe is with us every month on the first Wednesday of every month at 12 o'clock noon Central Time, 9 o'clock Pacific. And she is a partner with us here at the Igniting Nation Broadcast Network. Rhonda, it is always a privilege. Please give Steve our best and thank him for sharing you with our audience. We love you, and we'll see you right back here next month at the same time in the same place as we talk about the No Regrets Hour. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you. And that brings to a conclusion our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. We broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel, and now on WND-TV and on Roku on the WND-TV channel. We encourage you to share our posts with your friends and family and let them know how they too can follow along this program, Revealing the Truth, and all the spectacular guests. Visit us at ignitinganation.com and see the roster of upcoming guests. Jonathan Kahn, Pastor Dr. Robert Jeffress, many of the people that you know and love will be right here, along with Rhonda Stoppe, Joe Newby, Cheryl Chumley, Peter Rosenberger, and Faith Blatchford to talk about dreams and visions. A great lineup, a great roster of guests right here at the Igniting a Nation Broadcast Center. Until we see you back here in our studios live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, we bid you shalom.